I want to start this morning with Ellie's story. And I guarantee when you hear Ellie's story, it'll make you stop and it'll make you think. Ellie James is the lady. She's from Abingdon and she suffers from a rare disorder. She's with me in the studio now. The order is called TMAU and it makes you smell. She's missing an enzyme which creates a constant odour of an open sewer. Imagine that. Imagine that. It's a condition that can never be cured. She has to live with it for the rest of her life. Wherever she goes, whatever she does, she could smell like rotting fish. Let's have a chat with her. Let's speak to her. Ellie's in the studio with me now. Hi, Ellie.
Hi.
Yeah, thank you for coming in.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for making us aware of this condition, which, frankly, I didn't know existed.
It's very rare. Only 1% of people in the UK even carry the gene set, and even fewer of those actually present with the symptoms.
Tell me when it started for you. You went through, thankfully, you went through childhood without this condition.
Yeah, I didn't start to present with symptoms till I was 30. There are two types. There's type 1, which is genetic, which people have from birth. And there's type 2, which can have genetic connections, but can also be brought on by liver damage or enzyme damage. And my endocrinologist suspects that I sustained liver damage through an aggressive course of antibiotics when I was about 30, and that altered my metabolism and it damaged the enzyme, the FMO3 enzyme, which breaks down certain compounds, and then I started to get symptoms. So we've gone backwards through time to that point, which is when I had a 6-month course of antibiotics, and we think that has caused it for me.
When you say you started to present, you started to get symptoms, you're telling me you started to smell.
Yes.
Of what? How bad?
Well, I didn't really know at first, because people who have it, and this is a double bind with it, you can very rarely smell it yourself.
Ah.
So you think everything's fine and dandy, and then you'll start to hear comments. And so it's quite a cruel process, not just because it's quite horrible to hear other people's comments, but you have no idea that they're aimed at you, and it's a slow dawning on you. And I first started to notice my office started to smell like ammonia, very strongly of ammonia, which is one of the smells associated with it. And I thought, well, how come I'm not next to the lavatory? There's no reason it should smell like this. And I thought, no, it just must be cleaning product or something. And then I noticed the clothes in my wardrobe seemed to smell odd, or actually that my wardrobe smelled odd, but it was clearly the smell on my clothes.
Yes.
But I couldn't connect it. And it went on and on and on, and I hadn't really noticed comments from anyone at that stage, although I started to get gifts, Secret Santa gifts, and birthday presents, Christmas presents. There'd always be soap or perfume or body wash or pamper kits, and I couldn't figure it out. I thought, this is are they trying to tell me something? But why? Because I've always had impeccable hygiene. And then my house started to smell like something was rotting. And I thought my cat had brought in a mouse that had got lodged under the sofa and was decomposing. I spent 2 weeks looking for this dead mouse. And so it suddenly dawned on me that it was me. And then I started connecting comments I'd heard. And then the smell must have been increasing and getting much, much worse. Because people were actually coming up to me and being quite verbally aggressive about it.
What were they saying?
Things like, oh my God, you stink, you pong. Did you know there's showers at work? You could use them. Things like that. And oh my God, what's that smell? And don't you ever wash? And things like that.
How did that make you feel?
Well, it was awful, in one sense, because it was very, I felt like I was being bullied, but I didn't feel like I had any standpoint either for defence or denial or accepting it, because I still couldn't. I obviously knew it was me by that point, but I didn't know why, because I was washing up to 5 times a day. I was rubbing my skin with disinfectant disinfectant in case I had some kind of bacterial problem. I didn't know how to respond, so I felt very isolated and very desolate.
So you must have sought help. Did you go to the
Yes.
doctor first?
Yeah, I went to my GP, and again, this is something that people with the condition find very difficult. It's so rare that many GPs don't actually know about it. It's not within common medical practice. I mean, there are so many different conditions. There are too many for a generalist to always have at the forefront of their mind. They may never have heard of it, or they may come across it, but it hasn't stuck. There's too much going on medically to expect your GP necessarily to know that. But the first few GPs I went to had never heard of it, and one lectured me on personal hygiene, so he could clearly smell it.
Yes. What were they smelling? Rotting fish? Open sewer, I've mentioned.
Open sewer smell.
An open sewer smell.
Yeah.
So the doctor told you to get a wash, basically.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Very nicely explained to me, how personal hygiene works.
Yeah. But you knew it wasn't that.
I knew it wasn't that. But in my desperation, because the comments were getting worse and worse, and I did leave one job because I just couldn't stand it anymore. It was daily. I went online and found a support group, and it was a support group for all different types of body odours, and TMAU was one of them, but I didn't think that was what I had. I read through that and I thought, oh my God, that's a life sentence, you poor people, little realising that was what I had. But I took all these printouts to my next GP, because I moved around a bit with work in those days. I felt I had to leave jobs because it was unsustainable. So I moved GPs as well. I took these printouts to my then GP, and she admitted to me, yes, I can smell you. There's a problem. We need to sort it out. I gave her the printouts and she said, this is very promising. We'll try all the things on here that are suggested and we'll try and work out what it is that you have. And I had various tests and things done, and eventually we got a diagnosis for TMAU.
Now, was that a relief that you actually knew that there was a condition, a very rare condition, but nevertheless a condition, and that's what you'd got?
Yeah, it was an absolute massive relief. It was like being liberated, because now I was armed with information, and although I could see from the information it was incurable, I could also see there were things you could do to manage it.
Yes. I suppose deodorant, soap, any amount of perfume won't mask the smell.
No, and in fact, it can make it worse. It can mix with it and create a completely different smell, which is just as obnoxious. The things you need to wash with are very low pH, because that will trap the trimethylaminuria. That's what it stands for. That will trap it on the skin, and you can wash that off.
But I can tell my listeners now, sat with you in a studio which is quite enclosed, that I do not smell the smell of an open sewer. I do not smell the smell of rotting fish. So you have your condition under control.
Yay! Thank you for telling me that.
But why? I don't smell you at all today. Why is that? What are you doing? And do you have good days and bad days? What?
Okay, it's a routine. It's like with any medical condition that needs long-term management, you have a protocol to follow. And the first thing with TMAU, which is the most effective thing, is to cut down the amount of choline in your diet and the amount of trimethylaminuria in your diet. And they're compounds that are found in food related to amino acids. And they're very high in proteins, and they're very high in particular types of proteins. So the first thing you need to do is identify which foods have the highest percentage of choline and TMA in them. Basically cut those out. Okay. You do need a small amount of choline in your diet. You need a minimum amount for proper neurological function. So you need to balance make sure you get some protein that's got choline in.
So diet is very important.
Yeah.
What about medication?
Usually, if you're lucky enough to be assigned an endocrinologist, you'll be put on a course of aggressive antibiotics, which I find ironic, seeing
That
as that's
started
how
it in the first
I got
place.
it, yeah. But there are a particular type of antibiotics that kill a particular type of gut flora.
Do you take them?
I took them to start with, and the idea is that cleans out all the bad bacteria, because it's the bacteria breaking down the food in the wrong way that react with the enzyme not working to give you the smell.
How has life been for you with TMAU?
Difficult.
Do you go, yes? Do you go to the cinema? Do you have a boyfriend?
Yes, I do. Yes. Yeah. I've never had any problem having partners, but I do think most of them have no sense of smell whatsoever.
Really?
Because only one of them has ever been able to smell me.
Really?
And they're all very honest people and all very supportive. But not everyone in the population can smell it. It's a weird one. In fact, like family members typically can't smell it, but I think just as you can't smell your own odour very often, they probably get desensitised to it because they're around it all the time.
So what about other aspects of life? I mentioned the cinema there, didn't I?
I
Or the
don't
bus?
like to go to the cinema. And that's, although I know my condition is quite under control, I do know I still have bad days. And I don't like to be in an enclosed space with people.
So a bus, a cinema, a train. If you're having a bad day, does that mean you smell like an open sewer?
I can do, or someone...
rotting garbage, maybe?
Yeah, it depends on the level of TMA in your system.
Yeah.
But someone at work a couple of months ago said, I smelt like a stagnant pool.
Yeah.
And I knew I was having a bad week that week, because
Now-
you can't always control it.
Now, because you know what you've got, the comments like that these days probably hurt you less, do they?
They don't hurt me less.
Oh.
They hurt just as much, but I've become inured to it, and I'm confident about it, because having a diagnosis, being armed with the information, I can now very gently take people aside and
Yes.
say, this is a medical condition.
You can't take everybody
No,
aside.
can't. But it's discrimination. It's tantamount to discrimination, and it's not acceptable. And I don't blame people for making those comments, because you sit next to someone who smells terrible on the bus. It's horrible, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But at the same time, everyone has a right to live their life. So part of my being on the radio and so on is to try and get the message out, because although it's rare, chances are you will sit next to someone on the bus, and if you live in Oxford, you'll probably sit next to me at some stage.
When you first Googled TMAU, when you first came across that on the internet and you looked at it and you thought, oh dear, poor people, that must be a life sentence. Is it?
Pretty much. It's not curable, although you can manage it. And it also depends on if you have type 1 or type 2. Type 2 is easier to manage because there is usually some residual enzyme function. And if you take riboflavin, that's B2, it can help the enzyme to work a bit. And that actually, I find that works for me to a degree. If you have type 1, there's no enzyme function at all. Also for women, once they've gone through the menopause, it becomes easier to manage because there is a hormonal connection which isn't properly understood yet.
And are you getting enough support from family, from friends, from experts?
Oh, absolutely. I've got 2 endocrinologists. They're both wonderful. My GP's wonderful. My family, my friends, my work colleagues, they're just amazing. And my partner is amazing. And I can't imagine having got through this without any of those people. They've all been brilliant.
I knew we'd get reaction about this on the text and the telephone, and immediately we have from a taxi driver in Oxford. His name's Abdul. What a brave, brave lady she is. Give her a big hug and my best wishes.
Oh, thank you.
Well, we're going to get a lot of that, I know, because I've never come across a story like this before, and you've told it so well. How about the future then, Ellie? What happens next? Do you continue? You've got no choice.
I have no choice. But I want to raise awareness for this condition. There's a bit of a campaign going on in the support group at the moment, there has been for a couple of years, to try and raise awareness and to try and get this within common medical practice as much as possible, but also just to raise awareness for people on the street, because although it's not registered as a disability, you could describe it as a hidden disability.
Absolutely.
And it affects, I know so many people in the support group that have got it. I say so many, there aren't that many in the UK, but I must know 40 or 50 people who have this, and many of them don't feel able to work in office jobs or to go out and do their own shopping. Some of them feel housebound, or if they're not, every day is this constant struggle to get out of bed and interact and lead a normal life.
I can understand that, because if you're listening now, imagine through no fault of your own you have this condition which makes you smell, in some cases, like rotting eggs. I'm right, aren't I?
Yeah.
So you smell like there's nothing you can do about it. How would you go out of your front door? How would you get on a train? How would you go to the cinema? How would you go to work without being hurt? Without feeling insecure? It's very difficult, is it not?
And especially when you've been through it so many times before, you anticipate the response. So even if you're
Having a good day.
And you don't know if you are or not. You might get a sense that you're having a bad day, but you're never entirely sure until you get the reaction. So you're subconsciously, no matter how positive your outlook, always checking for people's reactions, because then you know, all right, okay, it's time to go home and sit in the house, or it's time to sit outside or open the bus window, or, you know, it never leaves your thought. No matter how far you push it down, you're always aware of it because of other people. You don't want to visit it on other people.
It's called TMAU, and if your mission this morning, Ellie, was to spread the word and raise awareness, then thank you, because you've certainly done that. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Not at all, not at all. We'll follow your progress, if we may.
Yes, please.
And we'll talk to you again, that's for sure. And if you've any thoughts about Ellie's story, then do tell me. You know what to do. You can telephone, text, drop me a line on email or Facebook. You can tweet at BBC Milk. It's 10:25.